Welcome everybody to this webinar from Wish. I would like to extend a warm thank you to our sponsors, which is City Fibre and Family Fund. And we have Kim here from City Fibre with us today. And of course, we have lovely Jane that's going to take us through the whole session. So what we're covering today, really critical things that we need in this world we're living in, how to communicate effectively, how to plan and prioritize your work, managing competing priorities, and a resilience tool. So Jane's going to take us through, show us some resilience tools and techniques to help us all in these challenging times. So on that note, I'm going to hand over to Kim.
Okay. Morning, everybody. Oh, hi, Cam from West Yorkshire. She just come on. I'll just say hello to her. So you're going to put a slide on. Brilliant. Thank you, Jane. I'm Kim. I'm the city manager for City Fibre. I'm based up in Leeds and Bradford and cover the Yorkshire area. And I don't know about you, but I think in these times of uncertainty, one of the things that I'm glad that I have that's certain is my broadband connection, because I could not have coped. There was a couple of days when my broadband went down right at the start of my time in isolation, and I just felt really cut off. And what City Fibre do is we build broadband and build connections through full fibre. So Jane, if you want to just move on to the next slide for me, please. So our network runs across the whole of Great Britain. We're not in Wales at the moment, but we do go all the way up from Inverness all the way down to Bournemouth. And the reason why we have pretty much sponsored the event today is not only are we interested in sort of uncertainties and also the presentation that Jane's going to put on, but we're interested in how we can help you as social landlords. We connect a whole city. So it's a whole city approach. Jane, you want to go on to the next slide for me? We connect the public sector, so the councils, the hospitals, the schools. We connect businesses, we connect homes, we connect mobile sites, and yes, we do connect some 5G sites, but I assure you there are no health concerns with 5G. But the thing that really concerns me is my background is actually in public health, and I came to work for City Fibre because I'm really passionate about making sure that everybody has the opportunity to connect to full broadband and just have those opportunities that the rest of us have based at home. And I think it's really important that our social landlords also ensure that everyone who can be connected to the internet is. And we connect businesses free of charge. There is no charge to the landlord. And as an open network, it means that anyone can use our internet. At the moment, our ISPs are Vodafone and TalkTalk. And we have other ISPs coming on all the time. So it means as a social landlord, you only have that one cable going through the building, but then your tenants get the opportunity to choose ultimately who they're getting their full fibre from, which really brings the cost down and makes it a lot more competitive for them. I don't know if you want to put on the last and final slide, Jane. So I'm not keeping you too long today. It's just, obviously, you all know the benefits of full fibre broadband. It's very reliable. As I said, it's having multiple ISPs makes it very competitive for tenants. And going forward, I think all properties are going to want to consider having IoT to look at those things like damp monitoring or just ensuring that all the fire doors are shut safely. And we can help with all of that. So that was my little sales pitch to you guys today. If anyone is interested in seeing how we can connect their tenants free of charge, please do get in touch. My details are at the front of that presentation, and I know that Tracy's sending the slides around, I think, at a later date, but do come back, and I really hope you enjoy Jane's presentation today. I know I'm going to sit and enjoy and listen to it. So thank you very much for your time. Over to you, Jane.
Okay, thank you, Kim. And yes, I'm sure everybody was listening to you there and thinking, gosh, if this would have happened 15, 20 years ago when we didn't have Wi-Fi as we have it now, broadband as we have it now, things might have been even more different than what they have been in these last few weeks. Thank you very much for sponsoring this event, Kim. It's been great to talk to you in the planning of this event as well and connect with you. Morning, everybody. I know you can't respond back to me, but it's really great to be with you from my little bedroom office at home. I'm hoping to share with you some tools and techniques which hopefully will help you through this next period of time. Hopefully you'll find them useful. I'm using them with organisations, been using them for a long time, but I'm using them now through the coronavirus pandemic and also personally. So I'm hoping by sharing them with you, it helps you personally to get through this next period of time. So just tell you a little bit about me. I'm not so keen on that photograph with I haven't worn tights actually for quite a long time. It feels quite strange to see myself with opaque tights on. But this is me. And I know there are some people who have joined the call who I've worked with in the past. Or I am on the board with at Yorkshire and Humber. So hello everybody, it's really nice to be here. So just a little bit about me. I have my own consultancy organisation called Hooger Consulting. I established this about 2 years ago after leaving a large housing association in the Northwest, working with Lynn, who's on the call here with me, and I was the director of people and risk at that organisation. And actually I've worked in and around social housing for 30 years, so it feels very much a part of who I am and what I do. So what I do now in Hooger Consulting is I'm a coach, so I work with lots of people as their coach. I'm also a coach supervisor, so I supervise the practice of coaches, which is always interesting. I do a lot of leadership development, management development in housing associations and beyond. In addition to team development, a lot of team development. But essentially I am a HR and organisational development specialist. So I support organisations with anything that is people related. That's very much my passion, and I really like to see people achieve their potential. I have been a Yorkshire and Humber board member for about 18 months now, which is really lovely. And I'm also the chair of a small housing association in Greater Manchester called Ashton Pioneer Homes. So yes, I should say housing is a big part. I'm sure that reflects it actually. So yes, I just want to share some tools and techniques with you today. And I'd be really keen if you put any questions in the chat box as we go along. Tracy will come to those at the end, or if you share any observations or anything, it would be great to discuss those towards the end. What you might find helpful is to have a bit of a pen and paper with you. You can perhaps take some notes or perhaps note down some reflections about how you've been doing while we've been going through this period of time, this phase that we've been going through. So just a pen and paper to note down any reflections that you have. Okay, so something I have been talking about for quite a long time is VUCA. And you have to be quite careful about how you say it because it can sound a little bit rude actually, but obviously it's not. But what the world of business has been saying about the world at the moment is that it is VUCA. And the VUCA stands for, it's volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous. And as I would have been talking about this in around November time, my focus at that time was thinking about how Brexit was throwing us into uncertainty and not knowing what rules would be in place and would it go through or would it not go through. Or I might have been talking about climate change and the impact on the environment around that. Or I might have been talking about the changes to the weather and in certain parts of the country, flooding, and how that impacts on our life, both personally and professionally. And then in the midst of all of this, we get COVID-19. And I think what that has done is that has thrust us into a whole new world of uncertainty. And if you think about COVID-19, it absolutely hits all the elements of what VUCA is. It puts us in a volatile position. Life is very uncertain. Will the lockdown be lifted? Will it not? Will it be relaxed? Will it not? Can I go back to work? Can I go to the supermarket without bumping into anybody? Life is very uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And because of that, that has a huge impact on how we feel. And studies have shown that COVID-19 is impacting on all areas of our health and well-being. So if you think about health and well-being, it is hitting us physically, because the amount of time that we can get out and about, being restricted to one form of exercise per day. It's restricting us psychologically, restricting some of us potentially financially if we have family members or ourselves who may be furloughed, or self-employed people who perhaps don't qualify for any support from the government. So it is challenging us. And then the last area of health and well-being that it's hitting is our social connectivity. So we're not able to get out and see our family and friends as we like to do, as we are so used to doing. So things that we take for granted have been taken away from us. So it is bound to have an impact on how we are feeling. And I've heard this whole period of time being referred to as the Corona coaster. I don't know whether anybody else has been heard about that. Hashtag Corona coaster was trending last week. And it can feel like that. And the first thing to recognise, it is totally normal under circumstances like this, and I don't want to use the word we're in unprecedented times, but it is totally normal for us to feel scared and anxious at this time. And it may well be impacting our sleep, because we're anxious about what the future holds, perhaps for our family members, for ourselves, for our careers. And so it can affect all of us in different ways. We're actually in day 45 of lockdown. So we're a heck of a way through this. And I've been reading that we are at the 6-week syndrome point of lockdown, and Sunday we're expecting to go into the second phase when we hear what the plan is for recovery and whether any of the measures will be relaxed. But it's ambiguous. We really don't know the answers, and in it we are up and down. So what we've been adjusting to in this last period of time is we have been adjusting to COVID-19, and the changes that we've all probably experienced in these last few weeks have been more significant in the world of work than there have been in the last 5-10 years. I've been working with organisations to support them to more agile ways of working. But most organisations were doing this in a transitional, phased way. So they were gradually allowing people to work from home. Or people may have worked from home for 1 day a week or 2 days a week maximum. This timeline shows that in the period of a week, our working world changed. And we, our teams, our team members, if we're managers, had to adapt particularly quickly. Organisations had to adapt really quickly. And I'm sure lots of organisations in their business continuity plan Hopefully they had things like pandemic in there, but it has seriously tested us. So first thing first is to tell yourself that this is normal to feel scared and to have down times. And what I'm reminded of when I see this kind of timeline and the speed of it is, in a different way, the Kubler-Ross change curve. And I've not got a slide to show you this, but I'm sure you've all seen it, whether it's in relation to the grief, the experience that people go through if they're grieving or bereaved. But we hear it in organisations when change is presented to us, and people go through denial, they go through anger, they go frustration. And you can see this change curve in what we've gone through in the last few weeks, certainly. And I've been reminded of that change curve at different points. So schools have closed, that's changed our worlds. Schools have closed, and some of you on this call may be providing homeschooling for children. That might be a whole challenge for you on top of your working life. For me personally, this picture has some meaning, because my son was due to sit his A-level exams. His first one was next week. And obviously, as you all know, that those have been cancelled. The way that A-levels are now going to be graded has all changed. Same for AS levels, same for GCSEs. And it sends us back into that cycle of uncertainty. And then fear for our dependents, fear for whether they'll get the same grades that they would have done had they have sat the exams. Will it get them to where they want to be? So all of this has some meaning for us. And even while I was out on a walk at the weekend, I walked past my local park area, and I'm taken aback again, and I go through some kind of shock on that Kubler-Ross. You know, even though I knew that play areas were closed due to coronavirus, just to see it there, a nice day, no children in there, and then thinking that probably there's lots of parents around the country trying to entertain children inside without getting them out. So we are on this corona coaster that takes us back through shock. And I don't know whether any of you've seen, there's been some recent research which has been quite interesting actually. It came out this week. So the research was conducted between the 9th and 14th of April that has found that in the main, the research has found that the people who took part of those people who are providing childcare or homeschooling, it's showing a gender divide already, in that the average person, the average woman who is homeschooling is spending an hour and a half extra per day more than her male partner providing homeschooling for their children. And already this is, the research is finding that this is causing an issue for women's mental health because they are trying to juggle competing priorities of working in whatever way that they work, and also the additional responsibility for homeschooling their children. And on average, an hour and a half they're spending more than their male partners are. And I'm sure there are lots of amazing examples. You know, this is research, it's not my own personal opinion. I'm sure there are lots of really good examples of male partners out there who are sharing the lion's share of homeschooling. But this is a challenge, and this is what people are facing. And it's for us to be thinking about our own mental health and well-being, but also perhaps people in our teams, people we are responsible for. It's an extra responsibility for them to be contending with. Okay, so that research was shown in the Observer newspaper, if anybody is looking to find it. and it was conducted by a number of universities, including Cambridge University. But obviously, with this being a Wish community event, I thought that was interesting to share with you. So if you want to go and find the exact details of that research, it is available on the internet. Okay, so we can be excused, I think, for sometimes wanting to just put our heads in the sand and kind of hide away and pretend none of this is happening. And actually, that's sometimes why I go through a bit of shock when I'm back out and I see signs like that, because, you know, I can just be concentrating on getting on with things and life can feel quite normal, and then I'm shocked by where we're at again. But really, hopefully, what we want to be doing is trying to adapt as best we can and actually survive and thrive. So we can lift our heads up and face some of the challenges. And hopefully that's what some of these tools will help you to do over this next second phase of coronavirus. So I promised that I would share some information about communication. You are all working remotely now, working from home, although you might be working with some key workers as well and supporting them, which has additional different challenges. But one of the big challenges facing people working remotely is communication, because normally if you work alongside people, if you see people in a workspace, then you can see their verbal and visual cues on a day-to-day basis. You might know if somebody is having a rough day, if somebody is having a down day, and therefore you might excuse perhaps an email that's sent with an unusual or difficult tone. And so we make more excuses when we are face to face. So the biggest technique to kind of suggest around your communication at this time is to be really clear. So it's clarity over style at this time, more than anything. So definitely if you're having to email, and I would suggest that email is probably not the best form of communication at this time. Try and do other methods of communication, because there's loads of room for misinterpretation in email. So things like Messenger, WhatsApp, Zoom, MS Teams that I know organisations are using are fab. Instant messaging, all that sort of thing are great. But if you have to do an email, then definitely reread it. If you receive an email and you think it has a little bit of tone to it, then a good test for yourself is to think, if you feel challenged by it, if you feel like somebody has taken a tone, then a really good way of trying to review that and before you react is to think, am I responding to my personal emotion if I'm going through a bad day, or am I responding to the facts of what's contained within this email? So really, each time you are communicating, think about what's the best method for communication. Use all the tools for technology that you have. Lots of instant messaging tools out there, so use all of those, and focus on clarity. Okay, and what I would say is, when you're in doubt of your communication style, err on the side of professionalism rather than being casual. But Zoom, I think, is fantastic, because when you are on Zoom calls or MS Team calls with your colleagues, co-workers, then what you get is a unique insight into their lives that you don't get when we're working in an office or together in a workspace. So use that, perhaps bring some fun and connectivity into it. And there's lots of really good examples out there about how teams can keep communicating and keep connected. That's really important to avoid social isolation for anyone at this time. Really good things to be thinking about is that at this time, people with an extroversion preference who are get a lot from being around, a lot of energy from being around people, they might find working from home particularly challenging and need some form of connection throughout the course of the day. Whereas actually this period of time now, that might be really quite nice for people with an introversion preference, if anybody is into Myers-Briggs type thinking. Okay, so I'm going to move on then. So if you are prioritising work, because now it can be a bit tricky in terms of feeling that we've got lots of priorities, this is a nice, neat little project planning tool that can be adapted to managing your to-do list on a day-to-day basis or a weekly basis. And basically you just order your priorities in terms of the Moscow tool. So the M's are absolutely what you need to get done. If you're thinking team-wise or organisational-wise, this could be the things that are compliance-based that the team absolutely need to do. It would be illegal not to do. Okay, so those are your M's. Then the S's for should-haves are just a little bit lower down than the must-haves, but are those that you'd get done if you've got the time and resources. Okay, could-haves are something that you would like to do but are less important. And then probably just as important to think about are the W's, and that's what you won't be able to get to. And so be clear with yourself about what you can and what you can't do. And actually just to think about what you're not going to be able to do can be good at this time in terms of managing the pressures that you're facing. Okay. Attention management. I quite like this thinking, and this research actually comes from the Harvard Business Review. Really useful for you if you're not a member or you're not signed up for Harvard Business Review, is that during coronavirus they have released all of their research materials to anybody. They only ask that you might consider becoming a member, but if you're interested in getting the research, this is just one. They've got loads of things around coronavirus if you're a manager and want to use some tools with your teams. So this is some theory around keeping your attention, because at this time it's very easy to become distracted. In a crisis, it's very easy to be distracted. And what can happen when we are distracted is that we become even more distracted. So distraction leads to more distraction. So some techniques that are suggested if you are dealing with children at home is to perhaps have a do not disturb sign on your workspace. And that might, they say the optimum time for a do not disturb sign is about 50 to 60 minutes. Obviously, if you've got young children in the house, that can be particularly challenging. So you might want to reduce it. But if you do have children at home, you might want to go in shift patterns with a partner. So one of you does the shift in the morning, so the other cares for children, and then you switch for the afternoon. Do not disturb sign is handy, just to keep children out of the room while you are trying to work on perhaps high attention tasks. In terms of chores, we might think because we're working from home that we can't actually do our chores, like anything, putting the dustbin out or putting some washing in the washing machine. But actually a technique for managing the distraction of building up chores is to treat yourself as a reward. So if you were working in a workspace, you might go and get yourself a glass of water or a brew from the coffee machine. Treat it in the same way now with chores. So treat it as a reward. So if you're dealing with a particularly difficult task, you might say, or you're writing a paper, you might say, I'm going to come up with the 3 salient points of this paper. And then when I've come up with the 3 salient points, I'm going to go and put that washing in the washing machine. So it says, plan for regular breaks and use those breaks as a way for you to be both personally effective with management of your chores and professionally effective. And then the last one is about this distraction and your thoughts getting carried away. And what it suggests is that if you are overwhelmed with worry, what might be a good thing to do is to allocate yourself a period of time that is classed as your worry time. So you might say, 15 minutes of the day, I'm going to allow myself to let my anxiety and my worries go. But that's all I'm going to do. And then after that, I have to crack on and get on with my work. So that can help you to just place your worries. You might have a little journal for them to write them down. And once you've written them down, you can kind of move them away. So that's some of the research that Harvard Business Review is getting out there to businesses and people as we go through this time. And it's a way of managing your time and trying to be more effective. Okay. A nice model, I think it's an oldie from Stephen Covey, but it's still a goodie. And this is Stephen Covey's Circle of Concern, Circle of Influence. And I don't know about you, but you can sometimes feel overwhelmed with all of the concerns around the virus. So when I go shopping, will there be a queue? When I go out for a walk, will people keep their social distance? And all of these concerns can become overwhelming. And what Stephen Covey says is that effective people concentrate not on their circle of concern, so they circle the wider circle of all these worries that take up negative energy and time of ours. They instead focus on what they can influence. So if you wanted to do this activity, it is a really nice activity, and I know Tracy is using this tool in a future event. It's really useful to kind of jot down, blitz all of those concerns that perhaps keep you awake at night, and then try and think about what elements of those concerns can I actually influence, and then jot them down in the circle of influence in front of you. And what Stephen Covey says is that proactive, effective people recognize that by focusing on what they can control or what they can influence, it helps them to be more effective. It helps them to be more positive and can focus their energies on more positive activities. And of course, that can help our health and well-being because we're not bogging ourselves down with the anxieties of the day. So that's a really nice model. It's been around now probably since the 70s or the 80s, but it is still very useful in terms of managing anxiety. And that's taken from Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And then I think linked to this is another model, a technique to use. And I love this one because if I find myself being overwhelmed, and sometimes in this period of time, either from a communication or not a successful communication, overthinking things. Social media and an overwhelm of media can cause overthinking or catastrophizing about things. And kind of linked to that circle of concern is the stop technique. So if I find myself being overwhelmed with kind of negative thoughts and worries, I literally say to myself, stop. And stop is step back, take some time to think and order our thoughts, and then proceed. And that might be you give yourself 5 minutes at the back door or the front door, looking out at the sky, going for a walk, taking your daily walk. Or it might be overnight. You give yourself time to put things into perspective before you act. Because if we act in the moment or we act out of emotion, sometimes we don't act as we would as our best self if we had a choice over our actions. And therefore, then we ruminate over that and we become anxious over our reaction. And so if we can take control of ourselves and become self-aware, emotional intelligence will be really helpful at this time for us. So literally, if you find yourself feeling like this, then just say to yourself, practice it, just say stop and run through that. Give yourself time before acting. And that is from Timothy Galway, that model. If you're interested in looking it up, that's from the Inner Game of Stress. Okay, so that's a really nice tool. And this one I've come across recently in response to coronavirus. On the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development website, they're doing lots of free webinars for members. And this is something to check in either on yourself, but could be something that you use with your team, if you have a team, if you're a manager. And it's part of the training that I use with managers about checking in with their teams. And it's really putting a number and a place on how we are feeling today. And then what would it take to get us up? So if I'm 6 today, what would it take to get me to 7? What's stopping me being a 7? And how can I take control of that? Or if you're a manager and you ask this of a direct report, how could I support you to get to a 7? It could be some kit or technology that they've not got that you can kind of open the doors to. So I think that's a really good checking in tool with how am I today? How am I going to have the day? How am I going to see the day today? So that's just a little tool to share with you. And then this next slide, 10 top tips, came from the same webinar with Carey Cooper. And you probably all heard of Carey Cooper. He talks in a lot, he's big public speaker, talks on a lot of areas like this around people practices. And these are his top tips for being an effective remote worker. Loads of these I think are really helpful. Definitely my work, I'm finding that people say that following a routine is really important. And as part of that, getting themselves up at a regular time that would be quite normal to their working day, definitely getting dressed, getting showered, feeling ready for work can help people be productive. Finding a suitable place in your home to work as well that can be away from distractions can be helpful, but definitely at the end of the working day, having some separation between work and home life is important, so work isn't a constant pressure and you're not drawn to doing it at, say, 10 o'clock at night or at the weekend. So there is some separation between what is work and what is home. Absolutely take the activities that we're able to do. I was reading in the newspaper this week that Spain are being released from their lockdown. They've not even been able to go out for a walk, and that has been one of the things that I have found so helpful. And there's a lot of studies that show being outside, being able to see nature can help our health and well-being. Even just being able to see the sky can help us. So taking a walk, going outside, even if it is, if we live in a flat, onto a balcony or into our garden, and just taking a moment to look up at the sky, taking a few deep breaths and thinking, how am I doing? But the big thing I think is really important is you are not just adjusting to working from home and finding that difficult. If you might not be finding it difficult, but you are trying to adapt to working from home through a pandemic. And that kind of puts it in a different perspective, I think. It's not just that you're trying to adapt to a different way of working. There's a lot of exterior noise and anxiety around. So allow yourself to think about that. Okay. And there will be good, there will be bad days, but allow yourself that time, talk to people, get some support if you need it. And definitely, I think it was said on the news bulletin last night that we are in a new normal. I said earlier how much change there has been organisationally and society-wide in the last couple of months. Our working life will not be the same again, I don't think. It really won't be the same again. So lots of things coming out about hot desking, and organisations certainly I've been working with have been hot desking or trying to move to hot desking. So concerns about hot desking and sharing desk spaces are emerging. Even sharing cups and glasses in the workplace. So this is going to be a new normal for us all, and we will still continue to be on that Kubler-Ross change curve. So perhaps bring it up on the website later, bring it back up, remind yourself of that Kubler-Ross model.
I think Jane has frozen.
So, and she has control of the slides. So I don't know. I think just looking at what Jane is just saying, I think what I'm going to do actually is while Jane comes back on, we'll just hope for her to come back on. I'm just going to cover what's come up in the chat with everybody. And hopefully I can't see myself in the screen, but maybe you can see me, guys. But we've had some brilliant suggestions coming in around check-in. So all around different types of check-in. So I'll do some name checks. Jackie, Nicola, Natasha, Chelsea, I think Haslin as well came through with some ideas. So they're all in the chat box. But there's some great ones. I think that check-in on a Monday is really good because it takes people from the weekend, from their private time, their home life time, into work mode. So that's a great check-in. And then the other one, the other end of the week, is doing that Friday quiz or dressing up or whatever you're doing to just leave work behind. And so I think they're two great check-ins for people to sort of compartmentalize as much as possible their work and home. Welcome back.
What happened there?
Jane, you just cut off. So I'm going to hand you back. We were just talking about what's coming through the chat box. So I'm going to hand back to you to carry on with your talk.
Oh, I'm so sorry about that. What were we saying about connectivity then, hey? That just shows, doesn't it? Right, that really threw me. So I'm glad you're back. I'm glad you're back. I'm glad I'm back. So yes, we are all being pushed out of our comfort zone. So perhaps try and think about what do I want this experience to be like for me? What perhaps do I want? And I'm not suggesting we all need to learn a foreign language, absolutely not. It may well be simply enough for us to get through a day. So I'm certainly not kind of spouting on about productivity. We all need to be productive. We've got to look after ourselves and try and be as effective, productive as we can. But how do you want to be in this period of time? And perhaps what can you learn about yourself that you want to take away? So that's all I wanted to say on that slide, really. And then hopefully some of you will have heard this before, but there are lots of studies that say that kindness and being kind to others and experiencing being kind to others, perhaps making another meal for a different household, leaving it outside for them, makes us feel better and gives us lots of top-ups of feeling good about ourselves. So definitely try and think about what you could do for others, even if it is being kinder to others and meeting people where they're at and listening to them about what's going on for them during this. It may well be that they live alone, so they don't have much chance for social connectedness. So perhaps just think about kindness and what you could do. But there's lots of studies also about practicing gratitude, so helping you through the day, perhaps to do a journal in the morning or in the afternoon or in the evening, or you know, you could do morning and evening, just to say, what are the 3 things that I am grateful for today? What are the 3 things that I have appreciated about today? And by saying that to ourselves or writing it down, it can make us feel better in ourselves and feel like we have more perspective over things. So having a journal, a daily journal, creating a habit of doing that is really good for our health and well-being. Okay, and we're getting towards the end now, but something certainly that is helping me at the moment is to think of this as only temporary. Yes, I'm sure that you know, coronavirus is going to be around for a while. All the news tells us that, but it will pass at some point. And to have some realistic optimism about this situation of, yes, it might be tough, or today might be tough, but I'm going to get through it, or we as a team are going to get through it. So to think about things as being temporary can really, really help us to put things in perspective and get through things. And another way of putting this is, if I'm having a sleepless night, can't get to sleep, feeling anxious, lots of worries, will I still be worried about this in 6 months' time? And if I won't be, then allowing that thought to drift away. Similar to the circle of concern and the circle of influence, that one. Okay. And then I wanted to just give you a couple of minutes just reflecting. And we've all had different experiences over this last 6 to 8 weeks. But I want you to think about, what have you done in this last 6 to 8 weeks that actually you have taken a lot from, you've enjoyed, you have appreciated, that you would want to maintain and continue after the measures are lifted. So just wanted you to have a couple of minutes just to think about that and perhaps make a note. So I'm not going to speak for a couple of minutes, and I want you to just have a think about what you want to keep going, and then I will come back to you. And actually, what would be really nice, if anybody feels like they would like to share what they'd want to keep going with after after the measures are relaxed, then use the chat box. It would be really nice for Tracy to be able to see those and to share them, and also to ask your questions, answer your questions. Oh, it's lovely. There are some being put in the chat box. Really nice to see these, and share them with the community. And that's what is so great about Wish, that we can be a community and share things. Great. Okay, well, I am going to now just pop on my last slide that I wanted to put on, and this has my contact details. So I am on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, and I've got my email address there and website address, and I would love to hear from you if there are any questions that anybody has about any of the materials used today. Certainly we can get the slides out to everybody who's been on the call, but I'd also really like to hear from you if you've got any tips or thoughts about how you are coping, your coping strategies for getting through this time. And so I'm just going to leave it there now and pass over to Tracy. I hope it has been useful. My aim for doing the session really was simply to share with you some thoughts about coping strategies for this period of time, and really to be useful to the Wish community. So I hope that it has been that. So thanks everybody.
So thank you for that. So I asked for questions to come in. So let's just see if we've got any questions. I think your talk has been so concise and complete. You've probably answered everybody's questions through the session. I think what's come through that's absolutely brilliant is the people checking in and sharing their ideas. So here we go. We've got a question. I'm a single parent working way more than full-time, homeschooling and responsible for all comms for our tenants. But I would love to stick my head in the ground sometimes. Could I manage this better than I am? That's from Vicky.
Well, first of all, wow. If you're working full-time, probably over your full-time contracted hours, and you know, you're at home on your own with children, I think I've been a single parent for a time myself, so I can appreciate that is challenging in a lockdown situation. So I think first of all, congratulate yourself and celebrate what you've done so far. I think that's the first thing I would say. I think about some of the ideas that I've shared here today, and think about what could work for you. Possibly the Moscow tool about saying, okay, I want to manage my own expectations here. I've only got so many hours in a day. I've also got to be a mum. So perhaps split your day into a routine about when you're going to work and when you're going to homeschool if your child is at homeschooling age. Break up your day into chunks. A nice tool is that managing your attention tool, where it talks about splitting up your time between high attention tasks and low attention tasks. So if you have high attention tasks, you might do them at the end of the day. I know it's not the best to do them when your child might be in bed, but you might have said, well, I'm not going to work in the afternoon, but I'm going to make up my hours in the evening. And so when the children are in bed, you could turn your attention to a task that needs full attention. It might be a paper you've got to write, or some communication that you've got to make sure is absolutely right, an important communication. So splitting your time up between low attention, high attention tasks. Low attention tasks you can do perhaps if you can entertain the children with a bit of TV or some technology for a period of time. So that might be a useful tool for you to use, and that one comes from the Harvard Business Review. That and the Moscow tool, saying, what must I do today, but what am I not going to get through? And just manage your expectations of yourself, really. And possibly, I don't know, I'm assuming you'll have a line manager, is to perhaps start a really open conversation with your line manager about some of the priorities you've got and what needs to be done and what can be put on the back burner. I don't know is that helpful, do you think?
Well, can I add? I'll add something that I'm doing that's been absolutely brilliant. At 7:15 every single night, I have a Zoom with about 8 other women from around Europe, and we dance. And we dance for 15 minutes. And it's such a lovely, so even if I'm completely knackered and I've got other things to do, it is such an energizer. So you've got a small child or child, I don't know how old they are. Are there things that are really fun for both of you that you can do together? Because it just takes the tension out. So dancing. The other thing I've got is a skipping rope. So if I'm feeling lacking energy, I'll just go and skip for 10 minutes. It all depends who you are as a type of person. But I think Jane's advice on expectations is probably the best advice you're going to get. But then find things that you can just do that are fun together.
Yeah, yeah. I hope that's helped. But if you want to email me, and I could perhaps elaborate and send you the research if that's helpful.
So have you got any suggestions when it comes to going back to work, if we're required to go back to work when our childcare may not be available? So grandparents not being available.
Well, I think the first thing to suggest there is to have a really open conversation with your line manager. I would imagine, I saw something over the weekend that said organisations are being provided with some kind of communications about planning a recovery back to work. And I'm sure this is going to be a big part of it, because if nurseries aren't open and grandparents still can't provide childcare because of that contact, then it's going to be a huge issue. So I would imagine organisations will come up with an approach or a response to that, but on a kind of individual basis, definitely open up a conversation with your line manager. Be honest about what you can and what you can't do, and perhaps you can come to an agreement about when you're available for work and perhaps when you're not. And if it's a two-parent family, perhaps that is time split up between, one parent being at work at one time and then switching.
Thank you. So there's some stuff to come through on the chat. So a lovely TED Talk interview with Elizabeth Gilbert, she of the Creative Genius, who is in lockdown in New Jersey. So Sarah's saying this is really inspirational, and it's okay to feel overwhelmed. I have to say, yeah, Elizabeth Gilbert is rather special. So the other one that came through here that came from Sarah, if I can find it, it's back up here somewhere. Is a saying: in the midst of winter, I have found that there is within me an invincible summer. So yeah. That's that inner resilience, isn't it? And
absolutely.
Okay, and I really think, honestly, as women, we have that. We have that. And so it is our time to shine, I think.
Yeah, and I think the research shows that actually, women are finding the time, despite the other responsibilities, to do what they need to do work-wise, and add in the homeschooling and the care for children. We just seem to just get on with it and do it. However, that's not to say that doesn't have an impact on us. And so, sometimes it's important for us to recognize what we have done and what we've been able to do, and give ourselves some self-care, and perhaps be as kind to ourselves as we would to our closest friends who might be in similar situations.
Absolutely. Thank you. So I've never felt more like a 1940s housewife. It's exhausting. That's from Tawny.
That's really interesting, because that was the headline in the newspaper that caught my eye. But it's very similar to that headline. And yes, so it can there was something, I think Dawn French tweeted recently that said there's nothing more stressful in life than having to think about what to cook for dinner every night. And I think even that sort of thing can just challenge us on a daily basis, and having to think. So yes, I'm sure a lot of us are feeling like that. So do something for yourself, do some self-care, perhaps dance with friends, book a Zoom call in. I had a lovely Zoom call with, it was due to be my friend's 50th birthday on Saturday, and we were due to go to a nice restaurant in Manchester city centre for tapas, and obviously we weren't able to. So we had a Zoom call, and it was lovely for 2 hours. and I delivered tapas round to their front doors, didn't see them, but I delivered tapas round, and then we ate it together on Saturday early evening, and it was lovely, and we all felt better afterwards.
Right.
So those little things we can do, we can try and find that.
I've done the same with donuts. So we've had a donut afternoon for the whole group. It's not quite as fancy as tapas, I'm afraid, but massive big jam donuts, and it's fun to just do slightly different but fun stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, and there's lots of quizzes, aren't there, that you can find on the internet now that people are doing. And yes, we might all get Zoom overload or whatever, MS Teams overload, but it's not going to be forever, is it?
No.
Hopefully.
No. So we get Lynn's just come through, so her husband is now doing risk assessment plans to get diverse teams back into work, and that's huge. It's very stressful. So,
Yeah.
so I think that goes back to your, and I think comes back to the change curve, because everybody's on a different, and we can go from different parts of it at any moment in time.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely.
Great. So we're now coming up, we're 20 past 11, guys. So if you've got any questions, we can take some last questions for Jane. And if not, I think we'll wrap up, if that's okay with you, Jane.
Yeah, that's great. I hope people have found it useful. I know seeing these messages in the chat, it's just fantastic. All these little things that everybody is doing. It's lovely to hear from everywhere. And, you know, it feels, even though we're on a Zoom webinar, it feels like we are part of the community and supporting one another to do what we can. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's really great everybody shared. It shares our learning and does connect us. I think some of the stuff that came on earlier, Jane, that you haven't seen is the people that are furloughed and for work colleagues in somehow having some social contact across people that are in a way holding the fort and probably doing two jobs, some of them, and then we've got others on furloughs that are finding it quite challenging to make the connections between the two, and that's come through quite strongly in the chat box, so that's great.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Thank you. So that just leaves me to thank Jane for sharing all her, well, some of her knowledge with us, and for this Wish event. And of course, thank you very, very much to Kim, our sponsor at City Fibre, because without our sponsors, we can't move forward and hosting these webinars. So there are going to be lots, we're putting webinars together all the time, really trying to support our membership as Wish. And so please do follow us on Twitter, follow us on LinkedIn, and on Instagram as well. We're on Instagram, so make sure you follow us so that we can share the love and support and come together to really, I think, as Jane sort of said, it's coming out of this stronger, taking the things that we learn and that we like and taking those forward and growing together as a community. So thank you, Jane, and thanks Kim, and thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you. Hope to see you again sometime, everybody. Take care and stay safe.
Okay, bye everyone.
Bye. Bye, Kim.
Bye.